Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Men in Red 97 podcast. As always, I am the pole with the goal, Alan, and that goal is to just figure out my schedule because I just started a new teaching job, and oh boy, that's been a lot of fun. I'm joined by fellow co-host Tim.
Hey, it's good to be back.
It's always great to have you on. We do not have DJ on; he is unable to make it today, and so it is just the two of us.
And we're not dodging hurricanes because that's probably what he's doing right now.
That's true. Oh man, yeah, I just saw that like what California is going through a hurricane now. Florida. Let's just say it's good to be in the Midwest, so we don't have to deal with
Well,
that.
let's say that I just got this letter from my mortgage servicer that was like, so you're in a natural disaster area. Like, let us know if you experience a natural disaster. And I was like, what are they talking about? I was like, oh right, Star Wars night when there were hurricane or there were tornadoes. Like, instead of West Coast are getting tornadoes, Chicago's getting hurricanes. Like, it's all things are happening.
Yeah, no, I mean we sometimes get like really bad storms, but I haven't. I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty sure.
You're already in Europe when that happened. But like on Star Wars night, literally like a bunch of us were walking into Soldier Field. I was with Jiggly, and like they just stopped. They didn't let us in. The like info doors like slammed shut. They like rolled the things down because there was a hurricane or a tornado that had touched down in like the vicinity of O'Hare, and they wouldn't let
Oh
us in for
yeah.
like 30 minutes.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember. I remember reading about that. I think it was like right before I came back, where there was like like really bad weather, um, over here. So yeah. So if you're listening from Cali or Florida, good luck. May the odds ever be in your favor. All right. So I first and foremost want to go out and apologize to our listeners for there not being an episode prior or after Orlando and prior to LA because of, like I mentioned, I just started a new teaching job and my schedule has been completely thrown in the wind. Like everything I've been doing for the past few years, nope, completely different. So I apologize for that. Hopefully this episode will go up before Vancouver. If not, then uh, I apologize. So the goal for today's episode is to go over Orlando and Galaxy, which I feel like can be kind of summed up together fairly simply. Go over Vancouver as well as maybe possibly DC just to get that out of the way because I feel like the overall gist of what needs to be done for the Fire prior to the playoff picture finally being taken.
yeah, we're on the road to the playoffs. It's not like I said in my match preview for the game that is happening when we're recording tomorrow um, against Vancouver. It's not do or die time, but it certainly is getting close for the Fire, and they just need to start getting points. I mean, they still are probably 11 points away from safety in terms of making the playoffs. That number varies a little bit. It could be as high as 14 points based on just historical what it would take to get to that level to be in ninth, averaging out for like a 15 team, what's now a 15 team conference. And obviously the numbers, probably there's a reasonable chance the numbers are, on the higher end of that figure just because you don't normally have a team starting out in the wooden spoon spot that is basically expected to win almost everything from here on with
Yeah,
anything added. So like they're hard charging from the basement, trying to make it up to the middle of the table. Um, they're for the same playoff spots that like the Fire, DC United, and a couple of other teams, Montreal, are really kind of duking it out for, and that more competition probably pushes up the point total a little bit.
yeah, amen. I say to that. We definitely do have a few teams below us, like you mentioned, DC, New York Red Bulls, Charlotte. Those teams are all 3 point vicinity of us right now. New York's also a bit close, and of course Miami. Of course, even though they're 9 points below us, or actually no, wait, they're hold up because they're currently at 21 points. I don't know how to do math. That's why I do music.
They're
11,
lucky they're fine. So
11
Miami,
points.
as we're recording, before the games that happened on Wednesday, um, Montreal are 3 points above us. We're even with a number of games. Miami are in 14th out of 15 teams. They are 11 points behind us. They actually have 2 games in hand because they had a game postponed and they were just 1 game behind, anyways. So, they realistically could be, charging up the standings. Directly behind the Fire are DC United, which have actually played one more game than us and are at 30 points. New York Red Bulls, even on games, 3 points behind us. And then Charlotte, who have a game in hand on the Fire and 29 points. So if they win their next game on a point per game basis, they will be level with where the Fire are right now as we record. So, it is kind of do or die time. Draws don't necessarily help you that much. It's like you just need to get wins.
Yeah. So, like you said, we need points, 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 points. Which earlier in the season, it wasn't as bad in terms of going on the road and actually getting some points. Excuse me, Ash. I just sneezed there. Excuse me. Um, and of course, I know some people have, especially within MIR, have been joking around with me coming back from Italy, all of a sudden seeing the Fire drop in performance, mainly being that ever since I was in Italy, out of the 6 games they played, they won 5. And now since I'm back, the 5 games that they've played, they've only won 1. So, Tim, assuming that you've been able to watch those games and really go into depth, because I was able to watch highlights while I was in Italy, so I was able to see some goals, some bits of play, but the overall game, like what's changed in in those games where the Fire were on a genuine win streak and they were picking up points to since the Leagues Cup, where ever since we fell out against Club America, we've now seemingly lost our way in those games against Orlando and Galaxy. Like what's flipped essentially?
So, I think that part of that is that the 2.5 weeks off when you're on a roll, like you don't want to stop going. And that's basically what the Fire had to do with the Leagues Cup. Even the Club America game, the public game, which technically was a draw because they were tied after 90 minutes and then the Fire lost on PKs. When both teams knew the PKs didn't matter whatsoever. I'm still, by the way, a little bit mad that Frank Lopez didn't have Spencer Ritchie, take one of the penalty kicks first because the penalty kicks are pointless. So just have the goalie go for it. Like, come on, just do it. Like it's more fun for everyone. Bring back goalie wars. I will die on this hill. But the thing against America, the the Fire honestly were pretty lively throughout the game. Like they were outplayed in stretches. They did actually bring it to Club America for a while. They looked pretty good in stoppage time. It's just the game was getting out of control because of off pitch events. So it ended kind of early for the amount of announced stoppage time, which is unfortunate because America were down to 10 men and the Fire actually were getting some good possession. So I don't think that they should really take that loss as, I mean, obviously it was a loss, but, um, they playing like that, like really, like taking it to the biggest team on the continent, I don't think there's anything to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
But then it was, 2.5 weeks off and just things happen. I don't want to read too much into it overall because, I mean, we are talking about 2 games. Like, it is 2 games. The bigger issue, I think, isn't so much what the results are. It's that the team has kind of looked like they've sort of fallen a little bit flat. Um, the games that you were away for, I mean, one theory, and I'm just putting this out there, is that some parts of the MLS season, it just kind of feels like the dog days of summer where things just sort of like drag on for a while. And you'll hear players and ex players talk about this, where there's just some games where you're like, it's like, the 23rd game of the season, whatever, like you've been playing for a long time, but you've got a lot to go. And it's like you're playing in Houston and it's 120,000 degrees out. And so, like, are you really giving it your effort when, like, does it really matter that much? And so some teams kind of like don't, they just like lose mental focus in that like middle part of the season. From the Fire, I think we're very locked in with their focus, and that maybe helped them. Now that we're down to like the final, whatever, like 8 to I guess 10 games, 11 games, depending on exactly how many games different teams have played, they're like they're homing in on, okay, here's where we are, here's where we want to be in the playoff. Like if we want to like work our way to the playoff picture, if we want to push ourselves up into like having a home playoff game, if we want to push ourselves into a playoff spot rather than a play-in spot, if we want to, try to have home field advantage somewhere, if we want to get eighth so we get the one game at home against the ninth team, like every team is like really like focusing in on that. And I think maybe that's what's hurting the Fire a little bit, is just that the opposition is coming with a degree of mental sharpness that they didn't have before. And I'm not sure that the Fire have really been able to match that. I mean, I can say that I think that has probably been an issue, is that the Fire have not come out, and I hate to labor this, like come out with as much fire as the opposition in terms of focus and everything else the past couple of games.
No, that's something that's absolutely been noticeable, especially in these last two games since the restart of MLS. The moment that first goal that or our first and only goal that went in from Mauricio Pineda, the Fire almost immediately shut off. And for some reason, as I was sitting there right before that corner, right before the corner was taken, that ended up resulting in the goal for Carta, how do you say his name? Cartagena.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it just, I for some reason knew it was going to happen, and that's basically what happened. The Fire just shut off, and when then I look back to the Galaxy game, that's another example of the Fire just shutting off. Even though you're down to 10 men, it's still possible to play, even if you have to put in 120% effort. It's still possible to play. And we've seen games with the Fire and an opponent, whether it's the Fire are down to 10 men or whether the opponent is down to 10 men, that even with the one man advantage, it can still be even. But with the Fire, I felt they, for the most part, shut down. And there were
in that game against the Galaxy specifically was Gaston seemed, honestly, I should have looked this up by now, but I believe that may have been the fastest yellow card for the team this season. It was in like the first minute. And so he was already on a caution. He had a play that I honestly don't know what he thought he was doing there, because I've never seen a soccer player try to basically jump on the ball with both feet together. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And clearly it wasn't a master stroke, because it got him his second yellow and sent off before the game had even reached the 30th minute. And I think what really deflated the Fire there was as soon as play was restarted off of that free kick, the Galaxy scored. And at that point, you went from, honestly, kind of, I thought the Fire did have the better chances at the first 20 minutes or so. The Galaxy kind of were warming up into the game. And then you go down a man and a goal basically instantaneously in terms of like the run of play. And that was kind of it. Like there wasn't, no one really felt like there was a need to sort of like really change what seemed like it was inevitable. I mean, there were some decent-ish chances, like Jairo Torres came as close as he's come to getting a goal for the Fire in that game, going off the woodwork. And I want to say like the 82nd or 83rd minute, like the shot that he had literally went off of like one post and then the other for remaining out. And like, but I mean, by that point, the Fire were already down by 2 goals and had fewer than 10 minutes to play. So like, would that really have been a difference maker, or would have just been getting one back? And it felt like it was probably the latter, because the chance of getting another one, not super great.
Yeah. And then, of course, in the Galaxy game, that last minute penalty just to really seal the deal, because, like you said, it's just that lack of attention. I can't even honestly remember what happened that led to the Galaxy getting that penalty. Like, what was the foul that ended up leading to the penalty? I can't even remember for some reason.
I was so busy just like writing the game right up at that point, because the story was done, more or less, that I watched it. I believe it was a fairly weak foul that was inside the box, but only barely. And that's what led to it. But the story was done by that point.
Yeah.
And so that's also the second game in a row, if we, in addition to the Orlando game, where Fire kind of had like the nail in the coffin, the third goal that clearly meant that they weren't coming back off of a penalty. In against Orlando City was for Quincy Torres in the 68th minute. And then, here was like a 90th minute winner when clearly down by a man, you're not going to come back by two. But, I think that says something about the team's mental focus where having two penalty shots against you in two games kind of says that you're probably making some like slight mistakes with your attention to detail.
Yeah, and I actually just pulled up the highlight, and basically what happened was one of the Galaxy players, they were through on goal, and Jonathan Dean, I don't know whether it was a slight touch from his hand or his foot, basically made slight contact. Galaxy player knew and just fell. So I feel the Galaxy just basically took advantage of the Fire being just not in the right mindset and took advantage of that for that penalty. So.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
I mean, again, though, like, in the grand scheme of things, does it really matter? It does for goal differential, which may, it was a tiebreaker, and that actually could mean something this season for the Fire. But that game was decided well before the 90th minute.
Yeah. I mean, but still, um, the refereeing, I feel, especially in the Orlando game, was incredibly questionable. There were moments it could just be bias because I was at the game and, just really in the moment. For those who were at the Orlando game and didn't know, if you saw a guy in a green jersey over in the supporters section absolutely beating on the drum, that was me. That was a lot of fun. And hopefully I'll keep doing that in upcoming games. But
your fingers better prepared now than they were before.
They absolutely were. I actually wore gloves this time, so that way I did not get any blisters. That was fun.
Yeah.
What wasn't fun, of course, was the actual result. It just felt that, well, I mean, you had two disallowed goals, and you have just decisions after decision going towards Orlando's way. So it definitely felt a bit one-sided in terms of refereeing decisions. How did you see it, Tim?
Yeah, I felt the same way. I was elated for a couple of minutes when the Fire were ahead. And I'm kind of like honing in on those minutes in my mind. 2 or 3 minutes when the Fire were up by a goal, but yeah, after that it just clearly didn't seem like the Fire's night. And you sort of knew. I mean, I don't know if you felt this way, that when the first goal came, Orlando came like 3 minutes after, the Fire just were not really feeling like they were going to punch back. Um, you know, I but I mean, I agree. Like the refereeing, it was far from the worst refereeing we've seen from, uh, against the Fire this season. But it, I think some of the calls were a little bit questionable. I think that it was overly harsh on the Fire. I think there was some stuff from Orlando that was sort of like allowed to slide. Um, and I'm not really sure what to do with that information. Like, it is what happened, but like you don't pick the refs.
Yeah. It was just like you mentioned. The moment the Orlando goal went in, the Fire just shut down, and I feel like this is the reason why this team has such a notorious history, especially in recent seasons, with these dropped results when the Fire end up leading first. The moment they get scored upon, they shut down. It's the moment where it's like those students or those people where you give them criticism and they automatically shut down thinking they're terrible people and they just put themselves in a corner. That's essentially what the Fire has been doing in these last few games, last few seasons as well, where when they're they're in that position, they put themselves in front and they make one mistake, instead of saying, okay, let's fix it, they just shut down. They're like, okay, well, our time's up. And I feel like that's just been in general frustrating to watch, and especially with the combination of the refereeing decisions in the Orlando game. That last half was just really it was a bit difficult at times.
Yeah. To be honest, I'm pretty sure the referee was Lucas. I can't pronounce his name, but it's like SBPLA's Bala, I think. I can't remember the last time that he refereed a Fire game. I feel like there's certainly some referees that have made a number of calls against the Fire that they would not have made for the other team. Not 1,000% sold that's how the game was. I think that it was just more of an issue of the Fire kind of like being on the wrong end of things.
Mhm.
Um, I just looked him up. He was Polish, so
I mean, I was
go
about to
on.
say I saw it's Łukasz Szpała. That's how you'd say it in Polish. And one of the assistant referees, Adam Więckowski. The assistant VAR was Tyler Wyrostek, the very Polish last names. So yeah, fun, fun,
So
fun.
what you're saying is we need more Polish players on the pitch with that refereeing group.
I'm not saying anything at this point. I feel I don't know whether it's me or like Kacper Przybyłko or just any sort of Polish influence. I feel people just have it's just so negative. I'm not gonna lie. Um, and this is I don't want to say this is calling out one of our Men in Red members, but I got a notification that said this is all Alan's fault, in referring to, like I said, ever since I came back to Italy, the Fire have not been doing well. I low key almost threw my phone in on the field. That's how mad I was. And I just keep saying, like, at this point I probably shouldn't go to more games. And whether it's because of my mental health because of this or like just like I said, my teaching schedule, I actually I don't know. I mean, I would like to go to the last few games because like what, there's 4 home games left. One of them I'm most likely or very not likely going to because I already don't have money as much to really spend. So I'm probably not going to go to that Miami game. So yeah, I know, it's just been very very
Here's the thing,
interesting.
like the losses are not on you. They're following. There are some people that are falling asleep in the Chicagoland area tonight, who the losses can be blamed on. Um, some of them may have received yellow cards. Um, I don't think either one of them. I think that it is an issue of it being two teams that are sort of on the trajectory. The Galaxy, I was surprised at how well they were working out because they made a ton of changes during the summer transfer window.
Mhm.
Which is crazy considering the number of they were under restrictions where they could only sign either free agents or domestic players, or like players from within MLS, um, and yet they made 6 changes to their roster, and a couple of them were on the pitch for the majority of the game, and they did make a difference. And the Fire, um, obviously, basically added Doumbia. Well, not basically, they added Doumbia, and that was it. The loss isn't on you. Don't feel like it's on you. Um,
No, it's just that in the back of the mind feeling that, I'm in Italy, I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm waking up Sunday morning and I'm seeing, that the Fire won. And I'm like really excited. I'm like something has really changed. And I'm hoping and just that hoping that like I'm gonna be back in the stadium and I'll get to see some of the fruits of this labor. And unfortunately it's the complete opposite. So I feel like
no,
I
I
don't
get
want to
that.
blame myself, but it's like, what is going on? Like, why can't I be a part of this as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that is a question a lot of Fire fans ask. Like why can't this team? Because it does sort of feel random. Like, which Fire team are we going to see? Are we going to see the Fire team that almost beat Cincinnati in Cincinnati, or at least did not beat worked almost to a draw to Cincinnati, which was one of the only times that's happened this season, or the team that took it to Philadelphia, or are we going to see the team that just sort of had a goal dropped on it and then decided to sit around and park the bus for 60 minutes?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I know. So I know it's like not. my fault or anything, even though I'm not going to say who it is. If I swear, if something happens in the next few games and they say it again, I'm, I will go mental. But yeah, it's
Here's what you need to do.
yeah.
Go to the game and not tell me when you're going to the game and see how that goes.
Hey, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm still trying to figure out a lot of stuff here right
Yeah.
now. So,
Well, if you want tickets for the game that's happening from when we're recording tomorrow against Vancouver, I'll get you tickets.
I'll be able to get the student ones
No,
so I'll be fine. Don't worry.
I was saying for free, but okay.
No, it's
You're right. I honestly think the Vancouver game is going to be an exciting game. I'm like legitimately like obviously I don't know how it ends up because the game doesn't involve Lionel Messi, so it's actually not scripted, so we don't get the script ahead of time. It's all just
That's
it's
true.
all just improv. 90 minutes of improv from two
That, that
professional athletes.
that is true. That is true. In terms of previous MLS games, of course, last five, Fire have 3 wins and 2 losses. In MLS, we're not looking at Leagues Club right now. We're looking at MLS, and it's the same with Vancouver. They also have 3 wins and 2 losses, though we have 2 in a row, and they are recently coming off of a win against Portland Timbers. So we'll see what happens there.
They also played under A team, and they got one of their best players suspended for. So like it's like one of those movie games where they will have squad rotation and they have a major player suspended. I know the Fire do too with Gus on Jimenez, but I feel like right now the double pivot for the Fire, you really have 3 players that are kind of like keeper capable stars. And you got Fabian Herbers, who's like kind of working his way in that conversation points too. He's at least a very good option off the bench there and a couple of other places. So, like the Fire have that going for them.
That's true.
And and even it, time that that I really do want to live and die by every goal that I see. And you take the wins on your chest and the losses on your chest and whatever happens in the night before, you wake up the next morning with a completely different feeling based on if it was a win, a draw, or a loss. But those times that it is kind of fun just to go and spend 90 minutes on the lakefront, watching a soccer game. And if you do that, I mean, Ben Sartini, I think, is he's the head coach of the Vancouver Whitecaps. He has some really interesting ideas about the game, the way that the game should be played. His teams play a fun to watch brand of soccer, and I think the Fire have some talent in some areas in some ways that his squad doesn't. So that makes for an interesting game. It should be an entertaining 90 minutes. The emotions are there obviously, for a bunch of us, but if you just want to go and watch the beautiful game being played, I think it should be a good night. And I think that the Fire honestly have a decent shot at doing some things and bringing some stuff to Vancouver.
Yeah, I agree. And like you mentioned, just going up to the lakefront, to see a game, be with friends, have some fun. No matter what happens on the pitch, always will be a great time.
It is the first piece in Chicago, but there's also perfectly adequate hot dogs and Polish sausages that. I mean, the steam and bun thing is a little sad, but you got
I know. Any sports game at this point, I just make sure I eat at home. Honestly.
Yeah. Well, and if you're going to a Fire game at home, there's also the taco option in the tailgate, which is phenomenal.
That is true. And also, if you need a drink, the water fountains are operational at Soldier Field. That I do know because I have been using them at halftime. Because
that was a huge pet peeve of mine in 2021, when the Fire started allowing people back in, and it was look, you're not letting people hydrate, and for a while early on after the pandemic, restrictions were just starting to clear. They were letting more people in. There were not more concession stands open, so the lines were just terrible. And it's come on. Like, no one's waiting for 45 minutes for a bottle of water in a soccer game. Like, the games aren't long enough for that. Like,
Yeah.
get some water fountain going.
I know, and I'm thankful for that because I mean, yeah, it's just a bit expensive, and even then, like the lines are long, and then sometimes, last few times I've been getting stuff at the concession stand, it's just been just ugh.
Yeah.
In terms of like the actual like I don't know like what system Soldier Field uses in terms of like their concession like payment and stuff like that. I've had experiences both where I've used cash and card where it just doesn't work. Where they're like, oh, you have to try tapping it again or inserting it, and they're like, oh, something's not wrong. It's taking a bit or something like that. When even if I go to like if I go to Comiskey for White Sox game and I get like I don't know I get the like mini helmet ice creams because I love getting those. I love ice cream and it works fine there even if the lines seem a bit long. Like it moves where I feel like
Yeah.
at Soldier Field it sometimes doesn't. So yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the issues with Soldier Field. I mean, it's one of the things the Bears have talked about. I think part of it is down to like just like literally the like prep area they have for concessions and the way that the staffing works there. Like you aren't able to get as much of a like assembly line going, I think, as you
Mhm.
are with other venues. But I mean, yeah. I mean, but having said that, like fire games do have, I think, especially considering the attendance, like a really good tailgate atmosphere before the game.
Oh yeah.
And there's food, there's drink, there's general merriment to be had there. So
Oh yeah, no, I absolutely love. I've recently been started to just going to more of the tailgates. Previously, I would just walk straight into the stadium and just wait out, camp out in the supporter section. But now it's like I go around. It is a bit of a walk though because I do take the trains. So like as much as there's the walk from Roosevelt over to Soldier Field. Now there's also the walk over to the South Lot. So there's that
yeah.
walk, but
So
it's a lot of
here's a
fun.
pro tip. Well, depending on the time, um, if you transfer, you're like taking it from the red line, right?
Well, I take the orange line.
So okay. Well, depending on when a green line going south is arriving, if you take the green line or the red line south, there's like this like southern route via like kind of like you go where the metro tracks as a pedestrian. It ends up being a little bit quicker depending on exactly when the trains are arriving.
Yeah. I think I know what you're talking about. I'm pretty sure that it would require like getting off at like Cermak.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what you do. Um,
I mean, I guess. I mean, I'm looking at the map and I mean, it's still a bit of a walk nonetheless.
it's a walk. Yeah, it's a kind of a walk. The early advantage of the walk, if you took the Green Line stop by the convention center, is that you went by Soccer House on the way to the like overpass by the metro.
Hmm.
Um, but like that's the Cermak McCormick Place stop. It's now no longer Soccer House. It's been sold. It's becoming a private residence. So I guess it's a little bit fun because you can't just like yell your opinions about U.S. soccer with the people that are not there because it's after 5 o'clock and they're not working there anymore.
Nah.
Um, I mean, it's a very like pleasant look in terms of like there's like lots of like old houses and stuff along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I mean, as long as I get there, that'll be fine. And I mean, the last game it was really hot. It was like I don't know exactly what temperature it was, but it was definitely in the high 90s, almost peaking past 100. I'm pretty sure. So it was, and the sun was intense. So
Yeah,
I don't think they.
it was definitely a long night. Um, so fun fact, because I am this kind of a nerd and also I write the preview, so I have to know these things.
Nice.
Um, the the game against Vancouver is the first game of the summer um, that the sun will actually be set by the time the kickoff happens because sunset is going to be at 7:28. So
Oh wow.
we're back to having night games, kind of.
Yay. Sounds like fun.
Yeah, fine. I mean, or whatever. Like, I personally prefer mid-afternoon games. Obviously, on a Wednesday, that's not a realistic possibility. But and honestly, like if this comes out before the Vancouver game is there and you're listening, I really do think it's going to be a fun time. I think it's going to be a good night out on the lake. So
I always enjoy a game, whether it's midweek or whether it's Saturday afternoon, evening. I always try to make, I always make room in my schedule for it. Whether it's I'll have time or whether I drive straight to it, because sometimes I do work on Saturdays from and I would get out at 5, so I would just drive to the train station straight there, change from my work clothes to my fire gear. I've done that several times. Or I would just sometimes just throw a jersey on. So I'd like have my dress shirt and then just throw my green kit on. So yeah. And I'm also looking forward to it to I love summer, but I'm looking forward to more cooler matches. So like having a sweater on definitely will be a lot of fun.
yeah, it's
Um
one kind of unfortunate thing with the fire trying to like minimize the possibility of like Bears, friction and games
mhm.
having to move SeatGeek is like we're not getting as many of those games.
Yeah. Speaking of, actually, you just reminded me a bit of a topic change, and that is it's news that definitely, if you're a baseball fan, White Sox fan, you're definitely hearing a lot about this. There is the possibility of the White Sox, or there's been talk within the organization of the White Sox moving house. Whether it's, I've heard somewhere near the United Center, apparently Soldier Field's also an option, even Arlington Heights, though that's for the White Sox, that doesn't really make too much sense. But there is talk of the White Sox moving house, and there has been a discussion of if the White Sox do move house, should the Fire take up residence on 35th and Shields?
That would obviously like that is the one location that I think really would make the most sense for the fire out of possibilities. I mean, even without the White Sox moving, just because you could work it out with like changing parking lots into a stadium and then a lot becomes a parking garage with multiple levels. But realistically, this is a ploy to try to get changes made to a publicly owned facility with guaranteed rate field. Um, they're not moving to Soldier Field. Like that is just clearly them just like putting. You have to have a rule of threes. Arlington Heights. Anytime if they're moving, it's the same thing that the Bears had. Like the Bears were looking for public money to move to Arlington Heights. They were not going to get public money in Arlington Heights because it's in Cook County, and there was no Cook County elected official that would get reelected with moves out of the city of Chicago to Arlington Heights, and so that's just a non-starter. So, I mean, is there a possibility that Reinsdorf, who is not known for spending lots of money, would decide? I mean, he's been buying up land by the United Center, so like that's the thing. But like, would he decide to try to raise financing and spend a lot of money to build his own facility that he would own? And just shadow a United Center? I guess it's possible.
I
Doesn't
mean,
seem that likely. It
from
seems
what
more like
I
it's
from what I understood, I think I read from a tweet from some of a White Sox like person saying that apparently there is an area of land near the United Center that's owned by Jerry. Hashtag sell the team, Jerry.
they've been buying parcels. Like there have been shadow companies, and it's been more than one that have been buying parcels. And so there was a tweet about a couple that are like pulling from each other. They've been buying land in the area, and I think the idea is that you buy enough land. But like realistically, it's also land in an area that's sort of like close-ish to the West Loop, which has been the like biggest success story for real estate in Chicago over the past 10 or 15 years. So worst case scenario, they can flip the land for more money.
Mm.
I think that is a negotiating tactic more than anything else. But they say, well, we own this land, we could build a stadium here. Don't you want to improve the stadium that we already have? Having said that, the problem is the timing with all of this. But the idea that the White Sox could announce that they're moving and then the Fire would build a stadium kind of like in what is now either guaranteed rate field or like the parking lots adjacent, and then what is now guaranteed rate field become parking lots for the Fire afterwards. I mean, you're not going to get a better location, more centrally located off of two L lines than that. I mean, it like that is basically a best case scenario if the Fire ever decide to decamp from Soldier Field. The problem is I don't think the Fire move from Soldier Field as long as there's a possibility that the Bears are leaving Soldier Field, and the Bears are taking their time figuring out if they want to leave from Soldier Field because they're realizing it's not as easy as they thought to get millions of dollars together and find lots of land and get the right government incentives that they really kind of need to build a new facility somewhere, realizing that like the farther you are from central locations, that harder it is for some fans, and maybe it's not a deal breaker, maybe it is. So the Bears lease goes until 2033. They can get out as early as 2027. At this point, trying to get out before 2030 is just not realistic for the team. They're probably going to drag it out to 2033. Time the Fire are sort of like, okay, because if we want this to be our home, and that becomes the issue of like the Fire kind of like waiting for the Bears to make a move that's definitive, and until they do, they're not going to make the next move. So it becomes a waiting game, and in terms of like finding a new home and building a stadium and getting approvals and architecture plans and stuff like that, 2033 isn't that far away. In terms of like, I'm a fan, I want to go to games with a good atmosphere. 2033 is a long time away.
Yeah, I know. But a lot of time, some time has already passed because it's 2023, so we've now been officially back at Soldier Field for 3 years. And of course, with COVID, it doesn't seem that long. Like I still remember when they announced, the return to Soldier Field and all that jazz. And then I remember me and my friends being like, "Oh, there's this COVID thing floating around. I wonder what's going to happen." So, time flies. And like you say, in the larger standpoint, 10 years, when 2030 comes around, it doesn't seem too long away. But like as of right now, it's still a long time away. There's a lot of factors that need to happen nonetheless. And considering the size of both organizations, being the Bears and the White Sox, something would need to happen from them before we can even like begin thinking about what to do. I mean, it would be cool to see like you mentioned, the location where like guaranteed rate is, or like where, or if we were to build something on the parking lot where Comiskey was, it'd be pretty interesting because we would be having our own stadium in the city with two L lines being right across. That would definitely help. Because you think of both situations.
It would be a fun return for soccer to like that exact location, because Husky Park did host a soccer bowl from the NASL days, like the Sting played there. So, I believe the Sting won a soccer bowl at Comiskey.
Do you imagine it, the Fire winning something at like a stadium where Comiskey was?
Exactly, like exactly the same land, like exactly like the like sort of like hallowed ground of NASL championship. I think that they called it a soccer bowl too. The soccer bowl.
A soccer bowl. That just sounds.
It was the 80s. It was a different era.
I know, but still.
I know. But yeah, like that would be kind of cool. It's just that, as far as I've heard, journalism is very committed to trying to make Soldier Field work as the home for the Fire, and is willing to like try to make it an exclusive home if that's a possibility. And it is like a very poetic location. Like obviously, like there have been World Cup games there and stuff like that. It's got a lot of history.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like the timing of just like, okay, we're not going to start thinking about moving until we know whether or not Soldier Field can be our exclusive home. And, the city of Chicago is going to try, at least somewhat, to retain the Bears, which means that this is going to drag out for years. And as a fan, just like someone that wants to go to games, in the meantime, you're dealing with the same issues of like, concessions are expensive and not that great because there's limited concession, prep area at the venue, and it's too big for an MLS team. It's, being as close to downtown as it is, you really couldn't get farther away from the L if you tried. Like all those like little like nagging things kind of add up, but it's still also a location that is relatively centrally located. Like it is directly off of like Lakeshore Drive. It's close to the highway. Like it's 20 minutes from the Loop. Pretty much anywhere that you try getting it, whether it's like via the L, via biking, or the like or driving, like however you're getting there. So like it's not a terrible location. Like they're the
No.
worst places to be.
You're not going to make everyone happy. You know, you're going to build a villain in someone else's story regardless of your lifestyle. And, you know, as much as, you know, I have problems with the concessions or whatnot, or the fact that I'm not a fan of driving in the city personally. I actually drove through the city, down in Lincoln Park and through Lakeshore Drive and everything, and I'm not a fan. I'm not for that. You know, I actually drove past Soldier Field. I like thought about like the whole parking situation, like reading Bears fans and their opinions about like parking there, and they saying it's nightmare and it's terrible and whatnot. So yeah, no one's gonna be happy. But the location where Soldier Field is now, just the fact that it is in the city and that there are multiple ways of getting there that are more accessible than in terms of like, you know, looking at SeatGeek or Toyota Park. I feel like there's definitely more. It's more accessible to get there because for some
It's a
reason,
possibility, right? Like because getting there via transit was not impossible, but difficult in the heyday. Like because we did run shuttle buses, but the shuttle buses took a long time. I mean, 5 miles away from Midway, like is the thing, and Midway is the end of the L for the Orange Line. You know,
yeah, Midway's and I've done that commute now twice this season from Midway to SeatGeek, both using CTA bus and Pace bus, and it's just a bit annoying in both
but I mean,
instances.
like when I go, like I when I was out of college, I didn't plan it this way, but I ended up in an apartment that was a block away from one of the bars that did like literally one block walking away from the bar that did Pump the Pitch, and I did that a bunch of times. But like it wasn't expensive. It was like $10 or $15 on top of the cost of your ticket. Um, and it would take like you had like the bus would leave at like 5 o'clock on or something like that. So it's like the amount of time you had to devote to going to a game just became a thing. Whereas like, hey, you want to go to the game with me? People are like, sure. They're like, all right, let's meet at 5, and you'll be back by 10. And people would
No,
be like, it's got a commitment, man.
no, and like with Soldier Field, I've noticed that it's just so much more easier in terms of like how much you have to commit in terms of getting there than it is to like SeatGeek. You really have to be there way ahead of time if you want to make it. Because I did take a pub to pitch a bus from when it was the U.S. Open Cup game against House. I took one, and of course, like you mentioned, the bus leaves like at peak evening traffic time, so going down I-55 at a snail's pace, and we ended up getting into the parking lot like maybe like 10 minutes after the game already started. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, as well, right? Like, and and obviously there's some like if you're a diehard fan, if you're one of the people that is there like when the gates open for the tailgate and you're there as long as you can after, like you feel differently about it. But like Soldier Field does open the possibility for there being more casual fans. Um, that is kind of a blessing and a curse when it comes to like I feel like the Fire going to have a sea of pink um, in on October 4th when Miami is playing, regardless of whether or not Messi is there or in the lineup, even. Um, but it does open the possibility for casual fans, and I think it is smart. Like if you want to get more hardcore fans, you get more casual fans, and you introduce them to the team, the game, and you get them interested in coming to more games.
hmm Speaking of, I actually saw a post on the Fire's like the fan Facebook page, um, someone sharing the next few games for Argentina, and one of them happens to be um like October 10th and like 15th, and like the question being like, and there were comments um from Tata Martino on Messi's availability, and he did say Messi is going to miss maybe like 3 something games. So like the question is, what's the possibility of that being the Fire's midweek clash against Miami? Like, is that going to be a possible game where Messi's like not even going to be featured on the bench or something like that?
I think what we're talking about are the CONMEBOL World Cup qualifiers, right? And so
Mhm.
like there's two in September where he's probably going to miss a couple of MLS games in the September international window, and then they just, I believe, like fixed the schedule as you said for the October games. So they're playing Thursday, October 12th against Paraguay, which will not any longer feature Gaston Jimenez, but he was a part of that program for a while, and then October 17th against Peru. So most of that international window is being observed by MLS, where there's not going to be any games. I think there's a couple exceptions there for like some rescheduled games, but um, the on October 4th, like you would think that Messi would probably be available for selection. And then there's October 7th, which is their game against Cincinnati, which is 5 days before the game against Paraguay, which, I mean, who knows? My, my thought is that both Miami, Tata Martino, and Messi all seem committed to winning. I mean, like the entire reason that we're having this conversation is because Messi's committed to winning.
Mhm.
So if those games have relevance for them making the playoffs, there will probably be a greater chance that he will be available, whether or not, like, if he's needed, because we've seen that he can just sort of like walk off the bench and score a couple goals late. Um, but if the playoff position for Inter Miami, if they're out of the postseason contention, which could happen based on the September friendlies when Messi is gone, or sorry, the September international window when Messi's gone playing for CONMEBOL World Cup qualifying, and there's 2 or 3 MLS games that Miami are playing. I mean, if the game doesn't matter, do you think that Messi really thinks that it matters and like cares? Like, does anyone really care at that point?
Yeah. And there actually was talk. I saw from our friend Eli Lesser this week in MLS that there is a possibility that MLS will be changing its scheduling, the way that the matches and the fixtures are scheduled, not to overlap with international play. Of course, a lot of people are like, okay, this is definitely because of Messi. So that way he can play more games for Miami without having to miss out on still playing with Argentina.
Right.
So,
The joke that I heard was that because this is Messi's MLS now, what they're going to do is just like reschedule um, Miami's games during the windows to be played at those old boys stadium. Talking about and Messi's old team.
yeah.
So it's like, well, he's just like an hour away, so he'll just
Yeah. And
the game goes where Messi is.
yeah. And then of course still on the topic of Miami because we can't stop talking about them. They did announce that their new stadium is actually starting to be built and should be available or should be ready, I think, in the next 2 years, if I read correctly. And the person that commented about this said, please, 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 a few more times, can we do something like this? Soldier Field is a D rating by stadium ratings. Toyota Park is a C minus due to the fact that it's nowhere near to Chicago. So that just goes back to what we were talking about, because the Fire.
Yeah, I mean, that seems kind of harsh to both venues, to be honest. But all right,
It is, but I think it's at a a point of view of MLS in terms of how well Soldier Field does for the Fire. I mean, Bears fans, I'm pretty sure a lot of them aren't too happy with how Soldier Field is, but for different reasons.
yeah, I
One,
mean, a lot of the reasons are the same. Like the concessions are not that good, and there are not that many. Like there's not really enough bathrooms. Like when you're in the bowels of Soldier Field, like when you're not actually facing the pitch or the field, depending on what sport you're watching. Um, like you're seeing a lot of like concrete bricks that are painted over kind of badly, like it's like one of those like 1980s elementary schools, and it kind of just gives you this, and the outside part between the old Soldier Field and the new, it just feels unloved. Like there's like a lot of like empty vacant space that just seems like there's nothing going on there, and it sort of feels like you're sort of like in a abandoned parking garage waiting for like a confidential source to tell you something or something like that. Like, it's not ideal with that. But like,
Mhm.
I think that like the experience once you're at the pit, like obviously there's people that want the like actual like first row of seats to be closer to the pitch level. I think that at best it's kind of a minority concern because most people don't actually sit in the first row, and so does it really matter if you know you're 20 meters away or 20 yards away from the pitch? Does it really matter if you're row 15 or row 18? Like, does it, like, what do you care, right? Like, as long as it's the same distance, and it's pretty good for that. I
Yeah.
mean, there's other concerns with Soldier Field. Like, obviously, like, the drainage hasn't been great. The grass quality isn't fantastic. Like, they don't have an underground heating system for the grass. They don't have grow lights, like, all those things. But, I mean, again, like, I'm not saying that this solves all the problems, but I keep on coming back to, like, if people are having, like the Soldier Field renovation for the Bears, everyone loved it at first. And they loved it at first because those were years that the Bears were winning a lot. Like they made it to a Super Bowl in 2007, like which was 4 years after the new Soldier Field. Like winning doesn't solve everything, but like let's just try winning for a while first, and then decide how much we want to gripe about the venue.
Yeah, I know. And this is, like you mentioned, this is a topic that will go on for years, depending on what the Bears are going to do, what the White Sox are going to do, and then ultimately what the Fire are going to do. There's just so many factors, so many parties involved, whether it's the actual organizations, the city, the county, the park district. So many people at this table, and this game's going to be going on for a while. So, yeah, it at this point we just have to say it is what it is, and that the situation won't get solved any faster than it will be, no matter what other teams are doing right now. And all we can do pretty much, unfortunately, is just look and envy. Like I've mentioned this when I went to my first ever away game in Columbus and I went to lower.com field. I was definitely like, wow, now this is a soccer stadium here in the United States it's just wow. Like whether it's the way it's built to contain sound in, um, and seeing how they're able to really incorporate that in terms of getting the entire crowd engaged. The fact that you can go to a concession stand and you're in and out like that. They have like self checkouts and whatnot. So yeah, at this point, it's we just have to appreciate what we got.
I mean, there's an attitude within that. Like, I mean, part of it is I think that like obviously the concessions thing isn't solving having more people there, but I think that having more people there that are supporting the team um, does a lot for the atmosphere. Like, and in the room, like lower.com field sees 20,000 people, which is not that far away from what Columbus is averaging. It's also like it's thousands more than the Fire have in a lot of games, but it's also like thousands less than the Fire have had in some games.
Mhm.
And so they're kind of boxing themselves in with that for better or for worse. Um, like I do wish that the team would do a little bit more with trying to get people into the stadium, considering the number of available seats that like couldn't afford a ticket otherwise. Like it doesn't even have to be publicly sold tickets. Like there's ways to do it, but like there are opportunities that really like a big venue like that does present for the team.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I just love, especially about the more like newer stadiums that are currently being built, especially in MLS, is that they're very, very well done in terms of containing sound and really being able to spread sound within the stadium. You have those closed roofs over the stands that really help in terms of sound actually traveling instead of just dissipating straight up, which is I feel a problem.
What the supporters section is in Soldier Field.
Yeah, both
But a
Soldier
lot of
Field and in SeatGeek, because in both in
people,
SeatGeek and like Toyota Park, no matter what end you were at, whether you were at the Harlem end or whether you were on the other end, those are both open air. So
yeah.
sound just goes
Well,
straight up.
and the ironic thing was where they put the away supporters at Soldier Field, which is sort of like um opposite, like kind of kitty corner, like they're in the northwest corner of Soldier Field on the second deck.
Yeah.
Um, that is one of the areas that actually does the best job in the entire venue of reflecting sound back.
Yeah, because it's
Into the
underneath the 400s.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why supporters seem overly loud compared to their number. Like literally, there have been games where there have been like 12 supporters and like 4 of them have drums, and you hear them throughout the field because of the way that concrete reflects sound back.
Yeah.
And the fire supporters who outnumber them by 100 to 1, like don't have that advantage.
Yeah. And that's why sometimes, and this is a whole discussion that can be, a lot of people have their opinions on it. And that's why it's sometimes hard for the supporter section, for the supporter groups to interlock in terms of what they're doing, especially in the last game against Orlando. There was a lot of talk about each section doing their own thing, or like there being difficulty syncing because, like I've said, sound dissipates super quick in those sections, like even across like the section. So like where I'm at in like 124 versus where like majority of Sector Latino is in 122, even across those few sections, it's hard to
Yeah.
really sync up. And as I would love, what we've got going on in terms in 124, with our drums, our songs, and everything, we'd love to connect and play along with the other sections. It's hard. It genuinely
Yeah,
is.
it's virtually impossible to actually do. Like, and that's like the distance is in the feet is small, but like in terms of like sound, and it makes it, it also makes it hard for like I've been around, I've been around people that are fans that are like trying to like clap along and trying to someone's probably join in, but like it's difficult to hear. And so sometimes like fans, especially like groups of kids, will start their own chants like from sections away. And it's not because they're trying to like do their like literally like march to the beat of their own drummer. It's because they can't hear what's going on.
It genuinely can't. And even when the supporters were all doing fire, dun dun dun, fire, dun dun dun, and even when the graphics are shown on the actual screen, you can see it from the supporter section that how slow and how like just the sound does not travel. Like we'll be doing our thing and we'll be showing our hands and everything, and the fans, they'll be like almost a second delay, like not even halfway across the stadium. Like that's why it's just super hard to get any one sound going on. And that's why.
Well, I think part of it also is that you sort of like, for whatever reason, it seems like some of the like corners, even when there's people there, it seems like those seats are exchanged more often or something like that, where like you don't get as many like, hard season ticket holders.
Yeah.
So it's kind of difficult. You sort of go from like the supporter section to there's like a lot of fans in the middle of the pitch because that's what their season tickets are. In between is kind of this no man's land that is sort of like
even
it becomes a dead zone.
even in the supporters section, there's a lot of people where you can clearly see that they're taking advantage of the fact that supporters section seats are more cheaper, and they'll just put themselves in the first two rows, and throughout the game they'll just be sitting and like not doing much. And then in the last few games, I've definitely been doing an effort in getting a lot of those people engaged, like going over there and like singing and yelling at with them, and like especially in those sections, like in the corner, it has worked. And in times in the Orlando game, we've been able to get them in. But then once the Fire's energy disappeared on the field, it kind of also disappeared in the supporter section as well. Like we tried our best, guys.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes like a feedback thing, right? And like part of the reason that like feedback thing doesn't work is the venue, just like the size of it, and you have those dead zones, and then that also feeds off of what's happening on the pitch. And like when you sort of like lose, it becomes like a short circuit electrically. And so once you get a short, like you just like don't have the ability to kind of spark it back.
No,
Um,
power outage, man.
but
Just a power outage at that point.
But I mean, having said that, like like the Fire do get some flack sometimes for like not having a loud enough supporter section. Like when when you look at the size of the supporter section, the number of people that are there, and you look at like something specifically, like the number of the drums or like the diameter of the drums that are there, some of the things that are really providing a lot of the sound, like they're fairly comparable with most other MLS teams. It's not so much size, it's not so much numbers, it's just when you got four guys banging on the drums and you've got something above you that is reflecting sound back into microphones and stuff like that. Like, it's a different atmosphere than when you got four people that are playing on the same size drums, making the same amount of noise that's just going off, probably bothering some people that live a good couple miles away, in expensive condos in South Loop.
I mean, hey, like you've mentioned, just the amount of support we have, it just it can be comparable to what a lot of other MLS groups have. I mean, of course, some of the newer teams that have newer stadiums, of course, it's a bit easier for them in terms of, well, of course, they have a newer stadium that actually supports their sound a lot well. The way the seats are, the actual seats are actually more raked in terms of like the grade of Soldier Field. It's definitely a lot more flat. That doesn't really help. You can go on and on. This is a topic in terms of like how much the supporters are doing in terms of the actual groups and like the effort that's being put into this. This is a whole conversation, and it's one that's been brought up especially after the Orlando game. I won't get too into it, since we have been going for about just over an hour for our episode. I don't want to prolong this, but yeah. This is just, if you've been with the Fire for a while, you definitely know you know what the underlying issue is, or you have
part of it too is like I will say, like, rising tide does lift all boats, and like you're a supporter, like I feel like you and pretty much the other supporters that I've interacted with, pretty extensively, like, are more than welcoming of people. Even if you just want to come say hi at a tailgate and figure out if you like want to show up at another thing, and like that's the first thing, and then you start like learning chants, and like, if you want to start like, eventually like being one of the people that's allowed to bring an instrument in, like that's not that hard of a thing to skill out if it's the kind of thing that you think would be fun. But people have to start actually wanting to do it. Like that's
that's
but
true.
that first step, like that stickiness of like, I think this would be fun to do, but like I don't know how to do it. Like just show up at a tailgate, in the South Lot or the Waldron Deck, and like say hi to people and figure out if like these are people that you want to hang out with more, and just like ask. And like I feel like
No,
most would say yes.
yeah, no, especially like in the 3 years that I've been really a supporter fan of the Fire. I went from sitting by myself in one of the corner, like near the corner flags, to um, going to like these different events, becoming a season ticket holder, going to the supporter section, just getting more and more involved. Of course, for me, it took a while because I do have this wonderful thing called social anxiety. I know for someone like me, it's weird, but it's not hard. Literally, the first step is going to either a tailgate or like to the supporter section and just standing in the midst there and joining along. Even if you don't know Spanish and you just sit in Sector Latino or like nearby and just go along. I mean, hey, I don't speak Spanish yet. I've learned those chants. It's really not too difficult, especially, it comes with repetition and with practice, really. So
Stands about the TV music.
that's true. I am a musician, so it is fairly easier for me to catch on. But hey, I mean, hey, like with anything, whether it's music or sports or any craft, practice makes perfect, or
Also, I'm just gonna put this out there. Supporters chants, not just with the Fire, but universally.
Mhm.
Perfection is not necessarily the goal or even really the objective.
Oh no. Oh no, no.
Oh, yeah, it's close enough.
No, I meant in the sense of knowing it, of knowing it
Yeah,
and being and sort of integrating yourself into it, You just got to keep doing
yeah,
it.
I was just making a singing joke. I mean, the one exception to that, I guess, is Wales. Um, if you're ever bored, like listening to like the like Welsh national team supporters like sing the anthem before a match, it's just like, how are you doing better than the person that's like on the pitch doing this?
Yeah. So,
So, anyways,
anyways,
an hour.
I know we have been talking for an hour and definitely have been going on a bunch of rants about, stadium, location, all that fun jazz. I know we briefly touched upon Vancouver, and basically what we're saying is it's going to be a fun game. It's
Yeah.
definitely going to be a fun game.
Before the match starts and you're listening, please come out. I think it'll be fun. If not, like the opportunities are very limited. The next home game is September 23rd against New England. That could be a good. Like that could really be a good game. There's a lot of interesting things happening in the Eastern Conference between now and then. So yeah.
Amen.
If you want to come out and see a game, come say hi to us. We'll be, hanging out at the tailgates pre-match if you are so inclined. We'd love to say hi, and yeah, that's pretty much
Absolutely.
it.
And if you ever see me wearing that green jersey, come up and say hi. I've had a few people. I've basically made a little brand of myself. Me wearing my little green goalkeeper jersey, I've basically have made myself a bit more recognizable. And I've had people come up to me and being like, "Hey, I recognize you from Fire Games." I've had a parishioner from my church job come up to me and be like, "Do you go to Fire Games?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, I knew it was you." And I was like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah, I recognize you with your green jersey and everything." I was like, "This is fantastic news." So, of course, if you ever see me or anyone else in the supporters, or even Men in Red, come say hi because we're a super nice bunch. As I say, holding a Viking axe for those people that can't see.
Not at all threatening.
I'm not threatening at all. I just have my Viking axe. For context, I play Dungeons and Dragons, and my current character is a Viking, and I got this for Christmas from one of my friends. And actually, in Ruins has the name of the Viking I'm playing, Magnus. So, a little tidbit about me. I say, smiling, holding my axe. Tim is definitely not feeling threatened by Alan holding an axe.
It's a very big axe.
It's an axe. It's an axe. All I will say is that I like Vikings. When I went to Denmark, I spent all my time doing as much Viking stuff as possible. And if I wasn't a Bears fan, if I wasn't from Chicago, I probably would have been a Vikings fan, but I'm not. Bear down. Bear down. Fun fact, the cooperating teacher I have at my teaching placement right now, because I'm student teaching, is a Packers fan. So you can imagine how that's going. Week 1 and week 18 of the NFL season are going to be so much fun. Just
Well,
it's going to be so much fun.
on that note, can we leave it with a fire down?
What?
I said, can we leave it with a fire down?
Fire down. Fire down. Fire down. Actually, before we finish, predictions. Do you have any score predictions for the Vancouver game?
I don't know, just because I have no idea how this is going to go. I predicted 2 wins in a row and there were 2 losses, as saying it's going to be a one-win game because both the way that the Fire play and the way the Vancouver play suggest there should be a fair number of goals, but I just feel like sometimes, like MLS is like, you want there should be a bunch of goals and then nothing happens. So I said 1-1.
1-0 for the Fire?
I said 1-1.
1-1 tie.
We haven't had a draw forever. We were getting draws left and right early in the season. And I just feel like it's like one of those things like this is like we're over just overdue for a draw.
That makes sense. I'm gonna say it's going to be a 2-1 win for the Fire. Like you said, it's gonna be goals, but I need it to happen. I need it to happen. I need a redemption arc right now. I need it, especially right now. So
You earned it.
I need it. I need it. I'm fiending for it. I'm fiending for Fire 3 points in front of my eyes, especially after everything. Like just think about it. You're 5,000 miles away from home. You're seeing your team doing great. You're waking up. You're feeling great. And it's like, I can't wait to come back home and see this. And then it just doesn't happen. You know how I'm feeling. I'm fiending for it. So, Tim, thank you for coming on the podcast as always. We wish a speedy return for DJ as well as Matt. Can I just say, I feel like our listeners miss Matt. He hasn't been on for a really hot minute. I'm pretty sure he's currently in Ecuador. So
yes, he's doing some scouting for Fire too there.
That's true. So, we wish for their return as soon as possible. And of course, I do apologize for the lack of episodes in the past. Like I said, it's my schedule. It has just been in the air ever since I started teaching. So yeah, hopefully that will be fixed up and we'll see a win. And hopefully this episode also gets out in time. If not, and you already know the results, I'm sorry. Just putting out there. Out there. But if not, then you guys can all thank Austin. So yeah, Tim, thank you for joining. Do you have any final remarks?
The person that edits our podcast and not the city or the football club of us.
Amen. So,
right.
As always, from us at Men in Red, as always, check out meninred97.com, as well as all social media platforms, MIR97. As always, come on, you Men in Red.
Come on, you Men in Red.